الدولية، وأنها لا تستطيع الاستمرار في تهميش 5 ملايين فلسطيني يعيشون تحت احتلالها محرومين من حقوقهم المشروعة، وأن حياة الفلسطينيين لا تقل قيمة عن حياة الإسرائيليين. وعلى القيادة الإسرائيلية أن تدرك أيضا وبشكل نهائي أنه لا يمكن لدولة أن تزدهر أبدا إذا بنيت على أساس من الظلم. على مدى السنوات 15 الماضية رأينا كيف تحولت أحلام حل الدولتين وآمال جيل كامل إلى يأس. هذه هي سياسة القيادة الإسرائيلية المتشددة التي بنيت على الأمن بدل السلام وفرض حقائق جديدة غير شرعية على الأرض، تجعل هدف الدولة الفلسطينية المستقلة غير قابل للتطبيق. وفي هذه الأثناء تسببت بتمكين المتطرفين من الجانبين، ولكنه لا يمكننا غض الطرف عن هذا الصراع باعتبار حله بعيد المنال من أجل الفلسطينيين والإسرائيليين. إن رسالتنا الموحدة للشعب الإسرائيلي يجب أن تكون أننا نريد مستقبلا من السلام والأمن لكم وللفلسطينيين، حيث يعيش أبناءكم وأبناء الفلسطينيين دون خوف. ومن واجبنا كمجتمع دولي أن نفعل كل ما هو مطلوب لإعادة إطلاق عملية سياسية هادفة يمكنها أن تأخذنا إلى سلام عادل ومستدام على أساس حل الدولتين. إن السبيل الوحيد لمستقبل آمن لشعوب الشرق الأوسط والعالم أجمع، لليهود والمسيحيين والمسلمين على حد سواء، يبدأ بالإيمان بأن حياة كل إنسان متساوية في القيمة، وينتهي بدولتين فلسطين وإسرائيل تتشاركان في الأرض والسلام من النهر إلى البحر. لقد حان الوقت للعمل بجدية. شكرا لكم.
أشكر جلالة الملك عبد الله الثاني ملك المملكة الأردنية الهاشمية على كلمته، وأعطي الكلمة لجلالة الملك حمد بن عيسى آل خليفة ملك مملكة البحرين، فليتفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فخامة الأخ الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية الشقيقة، أصحاب الجلالة والفخامة والسمو، أصحاب السعادة والمعالي الحضور الكرام، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. يسرنا في البداية أن نتوجه بجزيل الشكر والتقدير إلى أخينا فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية الشقيقة على دعوته الكريمة لعقد هذه القمة الإقليمية الدولية المهمة. نجتمع اليوم من أجل السلام والخير وصالح الشعوب، ونستذكر عقد أول مؤتمر دولي لصانعي السلام في عام 1996 ميلادي في شرم الشيخ، وهذا ما عهدناه في الشقيقة مصر وقيادتها الحكيمة ودعوتها الدائمة للسلام والتآزر وخير الأوطان. ونحن اليوم نؤكد موقف مملكة البحرين الثابت والداعم للحقوق المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق في إقامة دولته المستقلة ذات السيادة على حدود 4 يونيو 1967 وعاصمتها القدس الشرقية، وفقا لحل الدولتين وقرارات الأمم المتحدة لما فيه الخير لنا جميعا. ولدينا إدراك راسخ بأن حل الدولتين ضمانة حقيقية للتعايش بين الشعبين الفلسطيني والإسرائيلي جنبا إلى جنب في أمان وسلام ووئام، لأنه لن يكون هناك استقرار في الشرق الأوسط دون تأمين الحقوق المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق، وصولاً إلى السلام العادل والشامل والمستدام في المنطقة. وأننا في مملكة البحرين قد اتخذنا خيارنا الاستراتيجي للسلام لتحقيق مزيد من الأمن والاستقرار في ضوء نهجنا الداعي للسلام وتمسكنا بمبادئ الحوار والنهج السلمي والحضاري كسبيل وحيد لتسوية النزاعات وتوفير فرص الأمن والنماء والازدهار لشعوب المنطقة كافة. إن تطورات الأحداث في غزة ومعاناة الشعب الفلسطيني الشقيق والظروف الصعبة القاسية التي يمر بها تؤكد الحاجة الملحة إلى احتواء هذه الأزمة الخطيرة وتأثيراتها الإنسانية، وتتطلب جهداً دبلوماسياً متواصلاً بين كافة الأطراف الإقليمية والدولية لوقف التصعيد وإنهاء العمليات العسكرية وتوفير الحماية للمدنيين الأبرياء من الجانبين من انعكاسات هذه الحرب، والإفراج عن جميع الأسرى والرهائن والمحتجزين، وتسهيل وصول المساعدات الطبية والغذاء والماء والوقود والكهرباء إلى قطاع غزة بموجب القانون الدولي الإنساني، والكف عن أي ممارسات من شأنها اتساع دائرة العنف، مؤكدين رفضنا القاطع لتهجير شعب غزة الشقيق من أرضه وأرض أجداده. الحضور الكرام، إن قرار الحرب والسلم يبنى على أساس الاتفاقيات والمعاهدات والإجراءات الدستورية لكل بلد. أما إيقاف الحرب فهو ما تنص عليه الشريعة الإنسانية والقانون الدولي. وفي الختام نجدد تأييدنا للدور المحوري لجمهورية مصر العربية الشقيقة بقيادة فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي وإسهاماتها التاريخية في دعم القضية الفلسطينية وحماية الأمن القومي العربي، وثقتنا في خروج هذه القمة بنتائج مثمرة ومخرجات بناءة تعزز تطلعاتنا المشتركة نحو تكريس واستدامة الأمن والسلام والازدهار لجميع شعوب المنطقة. شكرا لكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أشكر جلالة الملك حمد بن عيسى الخليفة ملك مملكة البحرين، وأعطي الكلمة لفخامة السيد سيريل رامافوزا رئيس جنوب أفريقيا، فليتفضل.
صاحب الفخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي، معالي الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة أنطونيو غوتيريش، السيدات والسادة أصحاب الجلالة والفخامة والسمو، ملوك وأمراء ورؤساء البلاد وممثلي الحكومات، فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي، شكرا لاجتماعنا اليوم في هذه القمة المهمة، والتي نتمنى أنها تزيد من الوعي وتزيد من الوعي بشأن ما يحدث في هذه البقعة من العالم، ونتمنى أننا نخرج من هذه القمة بخارطة طريق ينتهي إلى حل. نشكركم على شجاعتكم وعلى رؤيتكم بأنه حتى في الأوقات العصيبة مثل هذه علينا أن يكون بمقدورنا أن نعقد وأن نجمع قادة الدول لأن نتشارك الأفكار والرؤى حول ما يمكننا أن نفعله. إننا نجتمع هنا يدا بيد وكلنا تخوف وقلق في مثل هذا الصراع غير المشهود الذي يحدث في قطاع غزة وإسرائيل كذلك، فإننا نعرب عن خالص العزاء والمواساة لهذه المعاناة الإنسانية. نحن في جنوب إفريقيا نرفض تماما مقتل المدنيين وكذلك الحصار المفروض على قطاع غزة وكذلك قرار التهجير القسري والنزوح الإجباري مثل هذه الأخبار الصعبة، وعلى رأسهم القصف وتدمير البنية التحتية وموجات العنف الذي ينتهك القوانين الدولية. والأدهى من ذلك وأمام البشرية جمعاء فإننا ندعو إلى وقف مثل هذه الإجراءات فورا ونطالب بتحرير الرهائن ورفع الحصار عن غزة. كذلك فإننا نطلب تقديم وفتح ممرات إنسانية للمساعدات الإنسانية مثل لتمرير الاحتياجات الإنسانية مثل الغذاء والدواء وتقديم كذلك المساعدات الإنسانية التي هي مطلوبة للشعب الفلسطيني. كذلك فإننا ندعو الأمم المتحدة لبدء عملية المفاوضات نحو حل النزاع الإسرائيلي الفلسطيني. إن المجتمع الدولي لديه واجب ومسؤولية لدعم عملية السلام وإنشاء وظروف مواتية وأوجه الحوار. ونحن في جنوب إفريقيا فإننا بالطبع مهتمون بما يحدث في فلسطين لأن شعوبنا تثمن هذه الجسارة والشجاعة أملا في تحقيق حريتهم ورغبة في إنهاء معاناتهم دعما للشعب الفلسطيني. ولكن كذلك لدينا قادة يتسمون بالشجاعة والقدرة على تنحية الخلافات والعمل نحو تحقيق السلام وتحقيق نظام عادل لهذه القضية. إذن نحث كل الأطراف على وقف هذه الاعتداءات. كذلك نحث كل الدول على وقف تقديم الأسلحة لكلا الجانبين رغبة في عدم تأجيج هذا الصراع. كذلك فإننا نعول ونلقي بالمسؤولية على الحكومة الإسرائيلية للعمل نحو تهدئة هذا الصراع الذي طال أمده لعقود عديدة وتحقيق السلام. كذلك فإن هناك تخوف من أن هذا الصراع يمكن أن ينتشر ويستشري ليكون خارج حدود السيطرة ليشمل دول عدة. والطريقة الوحيدة لإحلال السلام هو إنجاز التطلعات الشرعية للشعب الفلسطيني بشأن حقوق الإنسان وكفل كرامتهم وحفاظ دولتهم. هذا بالطبع يتماشى مع القرارات التي اتخذتها الأمم المتحدة والتي تضمن حل الدولتين إسرائيل وفلسطين بناء على حدود 67. كذلك من خلال عملية المفاوضات وتسوية هذا النزاع مدعومة بجهود المجتمع
realize the freedom that they need and the self-determination that they deserve. As the international community, we must call for a ceasefire to find a sustainable solution to this conflict and stand on the side of peace and justice and human rights, and end the human suffering that continues to unfold in Gaza right now. I thank you.
أشكر فخامة الرئيس رمفوزة على كلمته، وأعطي الكلمة لفخامة السيد محمود عباس رئيس السلطة الفلسطينية، فليتفضل.
فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية، القادة ورؤساء الوفود، السيدات والسادة، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. ينعقد هذا الاجتماع اليوم في ظروف غاية في الصعوبة والقسوة، حيث يواجه شعبنا الفلسطيني الأعزل عدوانا غاشما ووحشيا من قبل آلة الحرب الإسرائيلية التي تنتهك المحرمات والقانون الدولي الإنساني باستهدافها آلاف المدنيين غالبيتهم من الأطفال والنساء والمنشآت دون تمييز، وبخاصة المشافي والمدارس ومراكز إيواء المدنيين الناجين من ويلات الحرب وقصف بيوتهم. إننا نحذر من محاولات تهجير شعبنا في غزة إلى خارجها، كما نحذر من أي عمليات طرد للفلسطينيين من بيوتهم أو تهجيرهم من القدس أو الضفة الغربية. لن نقبل بالتهجير، وسنبقى صامدين على أرضنا مهما كانت التحديات. لقد طالبنا منذ اليوم الأول بوقف هذا العدوان الهمجي على الفور، وفتح ممرات إنسانية لإدخال المواد الإغاثة والطبية وتوفير المياه والكهرباء، ولكن حكومة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي لم تسمح بذلك. من ناحية أخرى نحذر من مواصلة اعتداءات قوات الاحتلال وإرهاب المستوطنين ضد المدنيين العزل في الضفة الغربية والقدس، واعتداءات مجموعات المتطرفين على المقدسات الإسلامية والمسيحية. ونجدد التأكيد على رفضنا الكامل لقتل المدنيين من الجانبين، وإطلاق سراح المدنيين والأسرى والمعتقلين كافة. ونؤكد بأننا نلتزم بالشرعية الدولية والاتفاقات الموقعة، ونبذ العنف واتخاذ الطرق السلمية والقانونية لتحقيق أهدافنا الوطنية. هذه هي سياسات دولة فلسطين ومنظمة التحرير الفلسطينية، الممثل الشرعي والوحيد للشعب الفلسطيني. فخامة الرئيس، القادة ورؤساء الوفود، هذه هي اللحظة التي يجب على الجميع التحلي فيها بالحكمة والنظرة نحو المستقبل. ونحن نرى أن دوامة العنف تتجدد كل فترة بسبب غياب العدالة والحقوق المشروعة للشعب الفلسطيني. وهنا نؤكد بأن الأمن والسلام يتحققان بتنفيذ حل الدولتين المستند للشرعية الدولية، وإنهاء الاحتلال الإسرائيلي لأرض دولة فلسطين بعاصمتها القدس الشرقية، وحل قضية اللاجئين الفلسطينيين وفق قرار الأمم المتحدة رقم 194 وبضمانات دولية وجدول زمني محدد للتنفيذ. وإنني أدعو لأن يتحمل مجلس الأمن مسؤولياته لحماية الشعب الفلسطيني وحصول دولة فلسطين على عضويتها الكاملة واعتراف باقي دول العالم بدولة فلسطين، والذهاب إلى مؤتمر دولي للسلام برعاية دولية لتحقيق هدف السلام المنشود. أشكر فخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية على دعوته واستضافته لهذا المؤتمر، وأشكر جميع الأطراف المشاركة وكل من يقدم يد العون لشعبنا في هذه الظروف الصعبة والمصيرية. أيها السيدات والسادة، لن نرحل وسنبقى في أرضنا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
أشكر فخامة السيد محمود عباس رئيس السلطة الفلسطينية، وأعطي الكلمة لفخامة السيد نيكوس خريستودوليدس رئيس قبرص، فليتفضل.
Mr. President, at the outset, I wish to express my deep appreciation to Egypt, to President Sisi, for organizing this very important summit at this critical juncture for our region. Egypt's role as a bedrock and promoter of peace and stability in this region is very critical. Cyprus, we are participating in this forum as a country of the region, the closest European Union member state, whose security is directly affected by the developments in the Middle East. We are also present as a neighboring country with excellent relations with all countries of the region, ready to contribute and assist in any way possible to de-escalate this conflict and facilitate the transfer of humanitarian assistance. The high-level representation is indicative of the urgency to overcome the crisis and to engage in dialogue in order to find viable solutions to the complex and recurring challenges our region faces. And in this regard, Cyprus' approach to tackling the current crisis is governed by the following elements. First, terrorism is a common threat for all countries, and there is never any justification. We have therefore unequivocally condemned Hamas' terrorist attack on October 7. Second, the fact that Hamas does not represent Palestinian people or the Palestinian cause. Third, the right to self-defense must always be exercised in line with international law, including international humanitarian law. Four, the need for permanent de-escalation. Fifth, the vital importance of protecting all civilians. The targeting of civilians and civilian infrastructure is unacceptable. Six, ensuring that humanitarian assistance reaches Gaza. Seven, the need for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. 8, the recommitment to a viable two-state solution in line with the parameters reflected in relevant UN Security Council resolutions. This can be the only viable solution to the problem, and it is clear that we have no other option but to create the conditions for the resumption of meaningful peace process. Dear friends, our region cannot afford to continue addressing its crisis in firefighting mode. What this crisis, the current crisis, as well as other crises have taught us is that there are no frozen conflicts. That in the absence of a viable, lasting peace, there is always the risk of erupting conflict with devastating consequences and ripple effects. In the vacuum created in the absence of fair and viable political solutions that address the root causes of conflicts, we will not see an end to the cycle of violence. The current conflict also presents a serious national security threat that cannot be overstated and should not be underestimated, particularly for the countries of the region. For example, Egypt and Jordan are shouldering enormous migratory burden. They cannot be expected to have more. Moreover, we fully understand and appreciate Egypt's legitimate real concerns, because we know that Egypt is a catalyst of stability in our region, and its security should not and cannot be jeopardized. We also share the fear that, as has often been the case in the past, our neighborhood will disproportionately bear the brunt of the consequences of this conflict. We cannot be expected to do that on our own. This is not a regional crisis of limited concern or impact. It is fundamentally a question of international peace and security, and a challenge that our global collective security system must respond to. The Secretary General of the United Nations, whose presence here today I very much welcome, must be given space to contribute decisively to peacemaking in the Middle East and to contain the ramifications of this crisis. Our region cannot afford further instability. It is in dire need of peace, stability, and security. Thank you very much.
أشكر فخامة السيد نيكوس خريستوديليدس رئيس قبرص، وأعطي الكلمة لمعالي السيد أنطونيو غوتيريش الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، فليتفضل.
Your Excellency, President El-Sisi, Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Excellencies, we meet in the heart of a region that is reeling in pain and one step from the precipice. A region where it is impossible not to be rocked to the core by heart-wrenching, soul-searing images of suffering. Yesterday, I went to the Rafah border crossing. There I saw a paradox, a humanitarian catastrophe playing out in real time. On the one hand, I saw hundreds of trucks teeming with food and other essential supplies. On the other hand, we know that just across the border, there are 2 million people without water, food, fuel, electricity, and medicine. Children, mothers, the elderly, the sick. Full trucks on one side, empty stomachs on the other. Those trucks need to move as quickly as possible in a massive, sustained, and safe way from Egypt into Gaza. A 20-truck convoy of the Egyptian Red Crescent is moving today. And I want to express my deep gratitude to Egypt for the essential role Egypt is playing in this regard. But the people of Gaza need a commitment for much, much more. A continuous delivery of aid to Gaza at the scale that is needed. And we are working non-stop with all parties that are relevant to make it happen. Excellencies, let's be clear. The grievances of the Palestinian people are legitimate and long. We cannot and must not ignore the wider context for these tragic events. The long-standing conflict and 56 years of occupation with no end in sight. But nothing can justify the reprehensible assault by Hamas that terrorized Israeli civilians. And those abhorrent attacks can never justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people. Institutional humanitarian law, including the Geneva Conventions, must be upheld. And that includes protecting civilians and not attacking hospitals, schools, and UN premises that are currently sheltering 500,000 people. Excellencies, our near-term goals must be clear. Immediate, unrestricted, and sustained humanitarian aid for besieged civilians in Gaza. Immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. And immediate and dedicated efforts to prevent the spread of violence, which is increasing the risk of spillover. To advance all these efforts, I appeal for a humanitarian ceasefire now. Excellencies, our sustained collective efforts and resources have never been needed more. As we focus on ending the bloodshed, we cannot lose sight of the only realistic foundation for a true peace and stability, a two-state solution. Israelis must see their legitimate needs for security materialized, and Palestinians must see their legitimate aspirations for an independent state realized in line with United Nations resolutions, international law, and previous agreements. The time has come for action. Action to end this god-awful nightmare, and action to build a future worthy of the dreams of the children of Palestine, Israel, the region, and our world. Shukran.
أشكر معالي السيد أنطونيو جوتيريش الأمين العام للأمم المتحدة، وأعطي الكلمة لمعالي السيد شارل ميشيل رئيس المجلس الأوروبي، فليتفضل.
Monsieur le Président Sisi, Altesse royale, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Excellences. Cher Président Sisi, d'abord permettez-moi de me joindre aux remerciements adressés pour cette initiative pour la paix, et vous remercier pour votre décision d'inviter l'Union européenne ainsi que d'autres États membres de l'Union européenne. L'Union européenne est un projet politique qui a été fondé au siècle passé après la tragédie.
Of course, the entity of the European Union have been established after 2 world wars. The courage and the responsibility of the international community is what enabled us to establish this entity. Allow me to read to you the 3rd item of the founding law for the European Union. Solidarity and peacekeeping and preserving human rights, especially child's rights, and full commitment to international law and right to self-determination for all nations were all included in the 3rd item of the founding law for the European Union. This is the procedure taken by the European Union before any crisis, and that's what we must adopt. Of course, it's inspiring for all of us. In case of our stance, the European Council stance, before what we're witnessing right now, the terrorist attack that Hamas has conducted against Israel and Israelis is, of course, denounced and deplored, and we must gather all efforts possible for mediation in this conflict to stop this conflict. And of course, we must take all the possible paths in order to protect civilians, especially children. And hereby, we reiterate Israel's right to defend itself, but this must be included inside the framework of the international law. Mr. President, you enabled us to gather here today at one table to discuss and talk together about what we can do for these underprivileged people, what we can do to help them, to protect them, to provide them humanitarian aid, to supply them with water, food, power, medicine. And I believe that it's very important, of course, to cooperate with the Egyptian authorities to enable the Palestinian people to receive these aid. And I, once again, would like to assure that the European Union is keen on supporting these efforts to deliver these humanitarian aid to Palestinians, to the Palestinian people. It's our responsibility to work with strenuous efforts to avoid the spread of this conflict, to contain it, and to find common solutions between us. I think this is the prime goal of this meeting. Another point I would like to discuss with you, ladies and gentlemen, is the necessity of exerting all possible efforts to have a sustainable, two-state solution. And that's, of course, the initiative that's adopted by many countries attending now. This initiative it's the initiative that gathered many countries together. All these countries attending today support the Palestinian Authority that represent the aspirations and demands, the legitimate demands of the Palestinian people. Of course, now we are in the context where Palestinians suffer from many difficulties. There are divisions, there are hardships, there are tensions, and that our responsibility as an international community is to work together and try to establish peace and stability in the region. And of course, we abide by these rules and the respect for international law. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Charles Michel, Chairman of the European Council. And now I give the floor to Mr. Mohammed Waldeshir Ghazouani, His Excellency, President of Mauritania. May he proceed. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful, Your Excellency, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, President of Egypt, Your Highnesses, Excellencies, Your Majesties, ladies and gentlemen. First, I extend thanks to Your Excellency, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, for your valuable initiative and for inviting us today for this meeting in light of the current circumstances that the Palestinian people are going through right now and its serious repercussions on the region. The status quo in the region is catastrophic by all means, by all measures. And what unarmed civilians are facing contradicts all principles and values. It will always be in our minds. It's against the human innate, the destruction and the criminal activities practiced against humanity. We look here at the Baptist Hospital is one of the most horrific atrocities in this conflict. The continuation of this situation warns of a massive chaos in the entire Middle East region. Something that cannot be predicted will happen. The effects will be unprecedented. The negative repercussions will affect the entire Middle East region and the world. And the dangerous situation that we're going through makes us must stand to exert all efforts to find a solution, to find safe paths, safe corridors, to deliver the humanitarian aid necessary for them and for the return of the essential needs, for the essential services of water, food, fuel, and power. And we must find an immediate ceasefire solution to secure the humanity, rather to secure the stability, and of the region. What the region is witnessing right now, the violence, the catastrophes, is nothing but an inevitable result and one form of the many forms of violence that poses a major threat to our security and stability. The Palestinians don't have the rights to establish an independent, sovereign Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. It is time now for everyone to be convinced that no one in this region will be safe or secured constantly unless the other side is secured. Peace is like security. You don't gain it by winning a battle or winning war. It will not be constant. It will not be stable for everyone. That's why we and the entire international society, community should be working with firmness to find a solution where we have two states, Israeli and Palestinian states, living side by side in peace and security. And the foundations for this solution exist in the resolutions, in legitimate solutions and the resolutions of the UN, and with initiatives like the Arab Initiative And the region will not be safe without this. And I look forward to finding this summit having a solution, having a fruitful outcome for the solution, for the two-state solution. And I wish you all the best for all the activities of the summit. Thank you, and may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you. Thank you, Mr. President. Mohammed Ould Sheikh Al-Ghazouani, President of the Islamic Republic of Mauritania. And now I give the floor to His Highness Mishal Ahmed Al-Sabah, Crown Prince of Kuwait.
In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate. Your Excellency, President, and our dear brother, President Abdel Fattah Sisi, the President of our sisterly country, Egypt. Your Majesties, Highnesses, and Excellencies, and estimated attendees, may God's peace and blessings be upon you all. At the outset, I would like to speak on behalf of His Majesty Sheikh Nawaf Al-Ahmad Al-Jaber Al-Sabah. May God bless and protect him. And it is my honor to extend to you his deepest greetings and his prayers for all of us to achieve the highest good for the entire region. And we would like to extend our deep gratitude to His Excellency President Abdel Fattah Sisi, the President of Egypt, for convening this summit, which comes in the throes of exceptional developments that are extremely sad for the Palestinian people, and that have grave repercussions on the stability and security of not just the region, but the entire world. Your Majesties, Highnesses, and Excellencies, we follow with profound pain the escalation and the continuation of military operations executed by the Israeli forces against our brothers and sisters in the Gaza Strip, and the scene of collective punishment that they are going through. And they are doing through targeting innocent civilians through continuous aerial raids, which resulted in the killing of hundreds of innocent civilians, men, women, and children, indiscriminately. As well, the Israeli forces keep targeting the core services, fuel, power, water, and as well push civilians towards the path of forcible displacement. And it is no secret that these horrendous practices violate the provisions and the values and principles of the international law and the international conventions and the relevant international conventions. Majesties, Highnesses, and Excellencies, these practices are the outcome and the result of the inactivity of the international community to tackle this case effectively, and as well the result of the international community adopting and endorsing double standards when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And we, of course, in Kuwait, we condemn the murder of civilians and the detention of these civilians and taking them hostage. And we, as the government of Kuwait, we call for the instant termination and stopping of military operations and for the opening of safe corridors in order for the aid to be able to access the Gaza Strip. And of course, we express that we denounce and deplore wholeheartedly the act of forcible displacement that the Israeli forces are pushing the Palestinian people towards. And in the end, I would like to say that we in Kuwait, as the Kuwaiti people, the government, we affirm the right of the Palestinian people to have and to receive their legitimate rights, and we reaffirm the importance of establishing an independent sovereign Palestinian state in light of the 4th of June 1967 borders. And of course, we affirm our support for the Arab Peace Initiative and all the initiatives and all the relevant initiatives that ensure safety and security in the entire region. Thank you, Your Highness Mr. Mishal Ahmed al-Sabah, the Crown Prince of Kuwait. And I now call on Mr. Mohammed Menafi, the head of the presidential program in...
صاحب الفخامة الرئيس عبد الفتاح السيسي رئيس جمهورية مصر العربية الشقيقة، أصحاب الجلالة والفخامة والسمو السيدات والسادة.
Excellencies, Highnesses, and Majesties, I would like to extend my deepest gratitude to our dear brother, President Abdel Fattah Sisi, and to the people and government of our sisterly country, Egypt, for their courageous initiative to convene this summit. Dear estimated attendees, we have to undertake our duties towards humanity in order to preserve the credibility of the international law and in order to ensure and instill international legitimacy. Ladies and gentlemen, what we are witnessing, which is represented by the targeting of whoever is living in the Gaza Strip, even if they take hostage in hospitals and churches and mosques, they still get targeted. Even, once more, I reiterate and say, even if they take refuge in mosques and churches, they still get targeted. We have to agree on formulation in order to stop and terminate the aggression on the Palestinian people. Since the Security Council has not been moving swiftly in order to stop the massacre and the crisis that is unfolding in Gaza. We have to do that in order to ensure and to affirm and activate the principles of the UN Charter, which preserves the value of the international humanitarian law and which is consistent with all other relevant laws. In fact, the Israeli forces are doing something that is completely inconsistent and violates the provisions of the international law and the international humanitarian law. Everything that the Israeli forces have been doing are unprecedented, atrocious acts that we are all witnessing in silence. And so we call for the instant stopping and termination of Israeli military operations in Gaza. And as well, we affirm that we are wholeheartedly against the incursion of Al-Aqsa Mosque and all mosques and churches and holy structures in the eastern Jerusalem city. As well, we call for an Arab participation in the negotiations of comprehensive settlement that are going to predicate on the two-state solution and on the resolutions of international legitimacy in order for us to utilize them as a basis for settlement and for reaching an effective resolve for the issue. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not being accused of our preliminary stances regarding protecting civilians. We are not just accused of that, but we cannot at all disregard the suffering and the plight of the Palestinian people that are now put under complete siege and that are living in extreme despair. We need to find resolve for these Palestinian people to still have hope, to have hope once more. The human beings in the Gaza Strip, one of the most dense regions in the world in terms of the population, the Strip is collectively suffering from the acts of siege, and the practices of the occupation are still practicing arbitrariness and rejecting solutions and peace-oriented approaches. We are, ladies and gentlemen, before a real challenge that we have to live up to. We have to own up to our responsibilities in order to stop the plight and the suffering of our brothers and sisters in Palestine. In fact, there are there are agencies, among which is the United Nations, that has warned of the gravity of the situation in Palestine in the midst of targeting mosques, houses, churches, and hospitals. And according to the rule, and the hospitals right now, and according to the report of the WHO, are completely out of control. In fact, we would like to, in Libya, we would like to express that we are against unilateral decisions and that we are against the forcible displacement of the Palestinian people into Sinai, and that we call for the continuation of the operation of the Rafah crossing under the supervision of Egypt. And as well, we call for the re-establishment of vital installations, institutions, and the reconstruction of vital infrastructure in the Gaza Strip, specifically after they got entirely demolished by the Israeli military machinery. We would like to express that we stand wholeheartedly with Egypt and our Arab brotherly countries against the liquidation, the attempt of the liquidation of the Palestinian cause. And from here, I would like to call on our colleagues in the Security Council and the United Nations agencies to undertake their responsibilities in order to find a resolve for the Palestinian issue. And President Abdel Fattah Sisi, once more, let me reiterate and say that I wholeheartedly thank you, and I thank our dear Majesties, Highnesses, and Excellencies, and the members of delegations for their keenness on participating in this very important international summit in order for all of us to protect our brothers and sisters in the Gaza Strip and to give them their self-determination right and to ensure their right for life. Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Al-Manfi, the head of the Presidential Council from the Republic of Libya. And now I give the floor to Mr. Boutros Sanchez, the head of the Spanish government.
Thank you. At this critical moment when we are all still in shock from the ongoing spiral of violence and bloodshed, it is time for the international community to act boldly. Therefore, I would like to start by thanking President Al-Sisi for gathering us today in Cairo. This summit must be the first step towards restoring peace in the region and breaking this terrible cycle of violence. Spain's position is crystal clear, as reflected in the joint statement we, the European leaders, adopted last Sunday. We strongly condemn the terrorist attacks perpetrated against Israel, and we also recognize Israel's right to defend itself in strict compliance with international law and international humanitarian law. If the international community does not act, the situation can dramatically worsen. At this point in time, we need to focus both on what is urgent and on what is important. There are three priorities we must address urgently. First, we must protect the civilian population and guarantee humanitarian access to Gaza. That means sustainable and sizable humanitarian, and that meets the needs for the Palestinian population. Furthermore, I joined the UN Secretary General's call for a humanitarian ceasefire. Second, Hamas must release all hostages immediately and without conditions. We must ensure all hostages, including Israelis and other nationals, can return safely with their families. Third, we cannot let this conflict turn into a regional crisis. The situation is very volatile, and a small spark can start a wildfire. We must use all our political influence with all relevant actors to avoid an escalation of the conflict. At the same time, while we act upon what is urgent, we must also act upon what is important. And that means offering the Palestinian people, as well as the Israeli people, a credible prospect for peace, which must be the implementation of the two-state solution. Two states, Palestine and Israel, in peaceful and safe coexistence. For too many years, the international community thought we could live without paying too much attention to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Recent events have proved us wrong. Today, we cannot postpone a solution. The international community has demonstrated in the past that if there is political will, there is a future. The Madrid Conference in 1991 and the Oslo agreements are good examples that we can bring hope. We must seize every opportunity to promote dialogue and peace. Dear colleagues, what we need today is to protect all civilians. I repeat, what we need today is to protect all civilians. Those who are kept hostage and need to be brought back with their families, and those who are suffering horror in Gaza. And the only way to achieve this is through more humanitarian aid and a humanitarian ceasefire. But at the same time, we must strive to set the building blocks for two states, Israel and Palestine, that respect each other and coexist in safety and peace. I sincerely wish that this summit will set the course for peace in the Middle East, peace that will ensure that the dramatic events that we are witnessing today won't happen again. Shukran.
أشكر معالي السيد بيدرو سانشيز رئيس حكومة أسبانيا، وأعطي الكلمة لمعالي السيد كرياكوس رئيس حكومة اليونان، فليتفضل.
Thank you, Excellencies. Let me start by thanking President Sisi for hosting this international conference aimed at addressing the current crisis in the Middle East. These are extraordinary times, and the situation in our common neighborhood is extremely grave. So it is right that we meet together here today. And in these critical moments for peace and stability in the region, I come here today as a true friend and as a neighbor. And the one key message to come out of today should be that we all condemn terrorism in all its forms, and we deplore the loss of life and the harm that has been inflicted to innocent civilians by the violence in Israel and in Gaza since the 7th of October terrorist attack by Hamas. There are innocent victims on both sides. There are civilians kept hostages, and no peace can be discussed until they are free. And there are civilians killed and wounded in horrible conditions, brutally assassinated in their homes in Israel, losing their lives in the destruction of the Al-Ahli hospital in Gaza. The position of Greece has been very clear from the beginning. Israel has a right of self-defense, but in accordance with international and humanitarian law. And I also want to be clear that collective punishment is prohibited by the laws of war. And these laws were designed to ensure that when war must be conducted, there are limits on what harm can be done to other human beings. And I will also share the opinion of the President of the European Council that a total siege is against international law. At the same time, we should also be honest in our judgment. Hamas is a terrorist organization that is inflicting unspeakable suffering both to Israelis but also to Palestinians. They should be held accountable. Hamas is not the Palestinian people, and we should not confuse the two. The Palestinian people do not deserve this. President Abbas, who heads the Palestinian Authority, rightly and bravely has spoken against violence from the very first day of the crisis. And it is very clear that the current situation poses grave risks of regional escalation. Egypt and Jordan are carrying a big burden and feel rightly very worried about the possibility of a forced displacement of the people of Gaza. And I'm here to support His Majesty King Abdullah, but also President Sisi, and to tell them that Greece stands with them. A widening of the conflict will have far-reaching consequences for the future of the entire region. And we should not underestimate the cost for all in terms of human lives and beyond. Our first thoughts these days must be with the victims, and we must recognize the pain and trauma that these attacks have brought both to Israeli and to Palestinian people and alleviate the sufferings. Hostages should be released and returned to their families, and the International Red Cross should have access to them to start with, and the immediate and unhindered provision of humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip should be ensured. And I want to emphasize the efforts of the Secretary General of the United Nations in this respect and welcome the announcement of the opening of a humanitarian corridor through Egypt to Gaza for the transport of the necessary provisions. And I hope that this can be put into effect immediately. Greece has been coordinating with our partners within the European Union. We are ready to contribute to any peace initiative, and as a neighboring country, we hope that an immediate de-escalation can be attained and humanitarian aid can be provided to all civilians. Last but not least, the future that we want for this region, the future of sustainable peace, stability, and prosperity can only be attained with the resumption of the peace process on the basis of a two-state solution. And if one thing should be clear to all of us is that no military intervention can replace a viable political solution. Thank you very much.
أشكر معالي السيد كيرياكوس رئيس حكومة اليونان، وأعطي الكلمة لمعالي السيدة جورجينا ميلوني رئيس حكومة إيطاليا.